Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Perfect.
Are you able to see the font? I'm getting a different font on the
Yes,
screen.
ma'am. It's visible, ma'am.
It's visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. This one?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because in my screen I'm getting a very dark background, black background, so I'm unable to read it. That's it.
Yeah, there's black background, but the text is visible, ma'am.
1 second.
I think you can go ahead with this, ma'am.
Yes, because there are other text I think which is hidden with the
Fine, ma'am. This is okay.
Okay, so you are able to see the font, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so good morning. Let me not drag it further, and I'm just going to take you through the scope of nanomaterials to be used as photocatalysts for energy application. So today I've considered two case studies, one with respect to energy applications and one with respect to the environmental applications. With the use of photocatalyst, with the use of nanomaterials as photocatalyst. Okay, so I think you would certainly had a introduction about what nanomaterial is and how is it really fascinating the world with with so many applications in the day-to-day life. Okay, so those who are unaware of 1 second, I'm just trying to minimize the speaker window. Yeah. Okay. So nanomaterials, briefly, we can define them as materials with the size and shape in the nanometer scale. So nanometer scale is nothing but your 10 power minus 9 meter. Those who are working in nanometer or those who are undergoing some course on nanotechnology and nanometers, they will surely know this definition. But why do we require this nanomaterials? Okay, so why do we require such small kind of materials? Okay, well, with a small scale, with the nanometer scales, we can apply them for processes with at least one novel or superior characteristics or property. Okay, so have you ever heard that changing the size and shape of materials can alter its characteristic property and which can be applicable for real day-to-day life applications? See, they are nanomaterials. Okay, so why do we have to choose nanomaterials? Why do we have to choose materials in the nanometer scale? We can, with the reduction in size and shape of materials in the nanomaterial scale, you can always apply them for processes with at least one novel superior characteristic or property. That's it. That is why nanometal is considered. Okay, so this chart gives you the various size fractions. Okay, various size fractions of various materials from the largest to the smallest, from 1 meter to 10 power 10, 10 power minus 10 meter. Okay, you have different volleyballs, you have coins, human hair, in the micrometer scale, grain of sand, you have red blood cells, bacteria, which is having different size variation from the largest to the smallest. And there are sub-nanometer materials also, okay, which we are not going to consider in this talk because it is beyond the scope of this presentation. So, can I switch off my video again? Just having some network issues. Can I switch off my video?
Pardon, ma'am?
Can I switch off my video because I'm having some network issues?
Sure, ma'am. Your convenience. You can put off, ma'am.
I'll just try when the network gets much better. I'll just try to bring back.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
1 second.
வீடியோ ஷேர் பண்ணலாம் இமேஜ் ஸ்டோர் வீடியோ எல்லாம் சேஞ்ச் பண்ணிட்டு இருக்கணும் சொல்லிடுங்க சார்
நீங்க சொல்லுங்க.
Okay.
Ma'am, while sharing the video, you have to choose when you click that share button, you can able to find what you want to share. In that, you have to select motion and the video.
Optimize for text.
Optimized text and images for showing PPT and other text.
One
If you want to
second.
share, you have to select the motion and the video. Click the share button. Then you can find what you want to share.
Yeah.
Drop menu, you have to select video to share video. Can you able to see that, ma'am?
You can see that.
Select motion and video, ma'am.
Are you able to see?
No, not yet, ma'am.
Not yet, ma'am. Not yet.
No,
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
You're able to see now.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. So I'll just stop my video alone for time being. Are you
Okay.
able to see my video also? My video also?
Yes, ma'am. Still.
Okay. Okay. Then that's fine. Okay. So why the nanometer scale? Because the properties of the materials differ significantly from those at a larger scale. Okay. So the property which are not very prominent at a larger scale, at a larger particle size, will be prominent at a smaller particle size. That's why we are much interested in the nanometer scale. Okay. So this slide is an example of the materials in the various size ranges, ranging from the largest to the smallest. Okay, now just slightly going back to the history of nanomaterials. Okay, so this nanomaterial concept of nanomaterial is born out of wild imagination, basically. Okay, so basically that it is a concept that was introduced in the 21st century, where people were talking about the large particle sizes and its effects on the and its effects related to the applications. There were some few group of people who were working on introducing the materials in the nano scale and its impacts. Okay, so that is how it is formed. You know this prefix. Basically, what does nano means? Any answer from the audience? What does nano means?
Ten power minus 9.
No, that is the dimension of nano. What does it mean actually?
Small.
We don't have any idea. Okay, so nano basically means dwarfs. Dwarfs. Again, can you see the picture on the left side top of my slide? This slide, it's a dwarf. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. You must have heard, no? It's a dwarf. Word that is derived from dwarfer. Okay? And there is huge distinction between nanoscience and nanotechnology. Okay, nanoscience and nanotechnology are totally different. Nanoscience is basically like you study the structure and molecules in the nanometer scale, which is ranging between 1 and 100 nanometer. And nanotechnology is one thing that utilizes this nanoscience in practical applications. Okay, nanoscience is the study of molecules and scales of nanometers in the nanometer range, and the application of this nanometer range in the real life devices is called as nanotechnology. Okay, so that is the difference between the nanoscience and the nanotechnology. Okay, so okay, so basically, nanotechnology refers to the study and application of extremely small things. And to study the behavior of extremely small things, we need to cover the fundamentals of physics, chemistry, biology, and technology in the nanometer scale. Okay, so it has to have physics, chemistry, biology, and technology in the nanometer scale. Okay, and the rest of the points that are given are history. The nanometer is the first coined by the Nobel Prize laureate Richard Zsigmondy. He characterized the particle size, and he was the first to measure the size of particles of gold colloidal mixture. Okay, and after that, that was in 1925 when the scope of nanometer was not known to people. Okay, then after 1925, it was again taken forward by the again one more Nobel Prize laureate in physics called Richard Feynman in 1965. Okay, so he just mentioned that there is plenty of room at the bottom. Okay, indicating the wide applications. Okay, indicating the wide applications of nanomaterials. He mentioned in a American Physical Society meeting that there is plenty of room at the bottom, mentioning that there is wide scope of nanomaterials in the forthcoming applications. Okay, this is a very small brief history of nanotechnology. Okay, so I told you that nanotechnology, the materials, the nanomaterials are different from the bulk materials because of their difference in particle sizes and shape. Okay, so how are they different? Okay, when you reduce the particle size, how it is going to be different? Okay, so that is what is shown here. Are you able to see the picture? 1 second. Able to see the picture, no? See in the right hand bottom side, you can see okay, material a solid block. Okay, this is a
Yes, ma'am.
right hand side, right hand first.
Yes, ma'am. It's visible, ma'am.
It's visible. Yeah. So right hand side first picture is a solid block, and the next picture is another blocks which is further made of small cubes, and the third one is the block which is made of nanoscale cubes. Okay, so you can see the size difference when it is broken. You can see the size difference, thereby increase in the surface area. So that is why you say that nanoscale properties are always different from the bulk properties. The surface effect and the quantum size effect. Okay, when the particle size decreases, the quantum effect comes into picture. Quantum effect is basically how much energy a quantum of material or an atom can in the nanometer scale, how much energy that a material can absorb and give it out as output. Okay, that is called as a quantum size effect. And when you further reduce the size of the nanomaterials, the thermodynamic laws are basically broken. Okay, thermodynamic laws are basically broken at the nanoscale properties. Okay, so and the advantages of nanomaterials, the advantages of such small materials is that you can form different shapes. You can form different shapes of this nanometers. You can form nano wires. You can form nano rods. You can form nanospheres, etc. Okay, different shapes can be formed from this materials. And there are different ways, unlike other material synthesis, nanomaterials can be synthesized by several different methods also. I think this slide is content is not visible. Is this visible now?
Ma'am, visible hai already.
Yeah. No, this in the full slideshow mode, I am unable to see some of the font. That's why. Okay. So I'll just go with this itself. Okay. So far we have talked about nanomaterials and the advantages of nanomaterials. I didn't cover too much in detail because it is the job, or it is basically the job of a physicist. A physics person or a chemistry person to dig deep into the materials. As a technology person, we usually are bothered about employing these nanomaterials as as technology indicators in the development of technologies. Okay, how the advantages of such kind of nanomaterials can be employed into our technology, our applications, and bring about wonderful results. Okay, and the wonderful nature of your nanomaterials has to be incorporated with your applications. Okay, so that is what is our botheration is about. So with the introduction of this nanomaterials, we are just going to get into the topic of your catalysis and catalyst. Okay, and those who have done chemical engineering, those who are in chemistry course, would be knowing that a catalyst is anything that catalyzes or speeds up the reaction. Okay, a catalyst is a material, okay, which can catalyze or speed up a reaction. Okay, during the process of altering, catalyzing the reaction, it does not get consumed itself in the reaction. Okay, that is the major advantage of a catalyst. Okay, it doesn't take part in the reaction, but it only alters the rate of the reaction. Okay, and it is a part of life cycle of our human life also, because in day-to-day life also, many of the materials are catalyzing our day-to-day activities, but we are unaware of it. Okay, so there are many such materials in nature which can catalyze our day-to-day activities. Okay, and catalysts are a very important phenomenon in chemical industries, particularly because almost 90%, more than 90% of the processes are catalytic, and huge amount of money is spent on finding new catalyst or usage of catalyst for various reactors and the recovery of catalyst, etc. Okay, so catalyst is of utmost importance in the chemical industry because majority of the reactions that we are undertaking are catalytic reactions. Okay, this is what I said. How does it catalyze? It catalyzes by taking part in the reaction. How does it take part in the reaction? It alters the rate of the reaction, the speed with which the reaction proceeds. And already there are desirable and undesirable reactions, because see, any chemical reaction, any A plus B, see, our intended reaction is A plus B to give C plus D. But there are unintended reactions also. During the course of the reactions, there are unintended reactions, undesirable reactions also. Okay, A plus B may give rise to E and F, and E and F can decompose to give C and D, etc. Okay, there are undesirable reactions also. So there are desirable and undesirable reactions, but our catalyst, okay, our photocatalyst that I'm going to mention here, should catalyze necessities, and it should catalyze the rate of the desirable reaction. Okay, and there are with respect to catalysis, there are the important phenomena that is involved in catalysis are regeneration, cycles, activity, lifespan, choice of catalyst, economical. All these are very important keywords. Okay, that must be studied in detail before you select a nanophotocatalyst for any reaction. Okay, regeneration basically means how many cycles it can perform. Okay, usually when a cycle of when a batch of a reaction is complete, we usually recover the catalyst, clean it, and then employ it for another set of reaction. Okay, so like that, how many cycles of reaction it can able to perform is for more number of cycles, because catalyst basically works by active sites. Active sites are basically the spots in the catalyst material which are highly active for the catalyzing the particular reaction. So activity, lifespan, how long it can withstand without much loss in the activity, choice of catalyst, economical, because I told you more than 90% of the chemical processes use catalyst. So naturally, the type of catalyst that you select should be economical. Okay, it should not burn their hands. Okay, so how does it alters the rate of the reaction? Is basically because as the reaction goes by, when it starts from XY, okay, X and Y are the reactants here. It starts from X and Y, and it gives the product Z. Okay, when the reaction starts, it goes to a maximum. The energy level goes to a maximum, and then it decreases. Finally, product is formed. Okay, so energy of the product is always lesser than the energy of the reactant, because for the chemical engineering students or those who are working in chemical engineering will know that for a reaction to be promising, or for a reaction to be feasible, the del G should be less. Okay, change in Gibbs free energy should be lesser. Okay, that's why energy of the product. So if energy of the product is more and energy of the reactant is less, what will happen now? Del G will be positive. In that case, the reaction is not at all feasible. Okay, that's why we say del G, change in Gibbs free energy, which is nothing but the difference in energy between the reactants as well as the product, should be negative. Okay, whereas activation energy is different. Activation energy, you can see it is the energy difference between the reactant. Okay, in this case, it is X and Y. Energy difference between the reactants and the maximum of the curve that is mentioned here. Okay, so energy difference between the reactant as well as the maximum of the curve is nothing but the activation energy. Okay, so free energy will always should remain the same whether a catalyst is used or not, because your catalyst is not going to alter the free energy del G. Your catalyst will not alter del G, but your catalyst will alter the activation energy. When you use a catalyst, what will happen? The activation energy will be less. Amount of energy required will be lesser. Okay, and you can see some small peaks here in this curve. Okay. See this first EG is the activation energy without catalyst, which is more, and there's another curve with the small peaks. It is the activation energy with when you use a catalyst. The small peaks are intermediate compounds, and if you want to know what are these intermediate compounds in the reaction, you need to characterize the product at precise time intervals, and then go for a spectroscopic analysis. Okay, and there are different types of catalyst. We are not going into detail of the different types of catalyst, because our botheration is here, photocatalysis here. Okay, so this is what, again, I'm just planning to reiterate. The selectivity of a catalyst, activity and selectivity are the two important criteria for any catalyst, and particularly for a photocatalyst. Particularly for a nanomaterial based photocatalyst. Okay, on activity, by activity we mean that it should promote the rate, it should improve the rate of reaction. Okay, it should alter the rate of reaction. Okay, that is activity. Whereas selectivity is it should promote a desired reaction than an unwanted reaction. Okay, that is what I'm mentioning. No, desirable and undesirable reaction, intended reaction, unintended reaction, etc. Okay. Activity should be more and selectivity should also be more. Okay, so that is a stable given. When activity is high and selectivity low, is not desirable. Activity is low and selectivity high is also not desirable. Activity and selectivity should be high, that is a desirable one. Okay, we'll move on to this photocatalyst. Okay, so far we have been discussing about what is a catalyst and what are the important criteria for selecting a catalyst. Same is applicable for photocatalyst also, except that the photocatalyst is basically a catalyst which is employed to speed up the reaction in the presence of a light. Okay, it just does this action of catalysis in the presence of a light. And how does it perform with respect to light? Again, it depends upon the active sites that are present in the catalyst. Okay. So naturally, when a source of light, it can be a UV light or a visible light or a sunlight, okay, or IR light. When a source of light strikes the photocatalyst, what will happen is it will generate the electron hole pairs. Okay, electron and hole are generated, okay, which enable the chemical transformation of reactants and regenerates its chemical composition after each cycle of such interactions. Okay, so this is the mechanism of photocatalyst. So the mechanism of photocatalyst goes like this. Okay, so as I told you, you have a valence band. This concept you must be knowing, isn't it? A valence band on the bottom and a conduction band in the top. Valence band is full and the conduction band is empty. Okay, so when a source of light strikes the valence band, okay, it causes the excitation of electrons and transfer it to the conduction band. Okay. So naturally, if this process has to happen, if this process of transferring these electrons from the valence band to the conduction band has to happen, which means that you need to supply energy either equal to or more than the energy that is required to cross the band gap. So what is the band gap? Band gap is the difference between your valence band and the conduction band. Okay. So you must supply a photon energy. Okay. You must supply any incident energy which is either equal to or more than the energy that is required for the transfer of electron from the valence band to the conduction band. Okay. So now when this happens, what will happen? Okay. So the electrons in the conduction band will jump to the valence band through the band gap, leaving the positive holes. And this stage is called your, so this stage is called as your reduction, and this stage is called as your oxidation. Okay. So there are, see, basically your photocatalysis is about redox reactions. You should have reduction reaction as well as the oxidation reactions. Okay. So what will happen as a result of reduction? The generated electrons and holes will lead to the formation of reactive oxygen species. Okay, so this is called O2 species, reactive oxygen species. Okay, due to this oxidation reduction reaction, reactive oxygen species are formed, and this reactive oxygen species can catalyze various processes, okay, such as your degradation of dye, your antibacterial activity, etc. Okay, so that is how this photocatalysis is happening. Okay, when the incident energy strikes this valence band, electrons are transferred to the conduction band, leaving behind the holes here. These holes can attack this oxygen molecules, forming an oxygen reactive oxygen species. Okay, and here in the reduction band, the electrons can react with the peroxide radicals, forming OH minus. Okay, this oxygen species O2 dash here and OH dash here are highly reactive that can catalyze the various reactions. So that is how the photocatalysis is happening. So basically, for all these processes, you should have sufficient incident energy striking the materials. Okay, so this is what is explained here also. Okay, there are and basically in all the photocatalysis process, we are bothered about the quantum yield. Okay, we are not bothered about the efficiency in such processes. Usually in all other processes we talk about efficiency, but in photocatalysis we talk about the quantum yield. Okay. So now in this we have two types of quantum yield. One is the primary quantum yield and second is the overall quantum yield. Primary quantum yield is basically number of primary products formed per photon is observed. Where is photon? Photon is present in the incident energy. Okay, incident energy that is striking the material that has photons. So primary quantum yield refers to the number of primary products that are generated per energy, per photon absorbed. Okay, so if you see this reaction that is given here, HI, okay, hydrogen iodide. HI is reacting with HU. HU is nothing but the photon here. Okay, the energy that is present in the photon. Okay, so HI, when HNU, which is the incident energy, when it strikes the hydrogen iodide, what you are getting? You are getting H and I. So these are called as the primary product. H and I in the first reaction are called as the primary products. Okay, so that's why your small f, which is denoted by the primary quantum yield, is given as 2. Okay, and this primary products that are formed out of this H is again reacting with the hydrogen iodide, forming H2 and I. Okay, and the two molecules of I are dissociating, give I2. Okay, overall quantum yield is the number of reactant molecules, primary reactant molecules. Okay, because you are basically here HI is only reacting. All H and I are the intermediates that are formed from the reaction. Okay, the major primary reactant is nothing but your is nothing but your HI. Okay, so number of reactant molecules react per photon absorbed. Okay, so in this, how many reactant molecules are reacting? HI is 2 numbers, right? one HI in the first reaction, another HI in the second reaction. These are the two primary reactants. Whereas H nu is the photon energy, H is nothing but your hydrogen that is released from the reaction. I is also released from the reaction. So your primary quantum yield F is 2, small f is 2, and the overall quantum yield capital F is also 2. Okay, and the quantum yield again depends upon the wavelength of light used. Quantum yield is again because it is dependent upon the energy absorbed, isn't it? Photon absorbed. Okay, so primary quantum yield depends upon the wavelength of light used. So if you want to alter the reaction using different wavelengths, you can use different light sources. Okay, that's how you conduct the experiments. You can use various light sources. Various light sources will have different wavelengths. When the wavelength is different, naturally the quantum yield will also be different. The product will also be different. So you can conduct your experiment using various light sources with different wavelengths and find out the quantum yield. Okay, so this again I explained you. So this is why we are using semiconductors. We are not using conductors and insulators for the photocatalysts. We are using only semiconductors. Nano semiconductors are being used as photocatalysts because you can see in the metals, in the conductors, basically there is no band gap. So no energy can excite anything from this. Whereas in insulator, the band gap is very large. Even if you supply your UV light or visible light or solar light, it cannot excite the electrons from the valence band to the conduction band. Whereas in semiconductors, you can see there is a reasonable band gap. Okay? If you supply energy to the valence band, you can sufficiently transfer the electrons from the valence band to the conduction band. That is why we are going for semiconductors as photocatalysts. We use semiconductors as photocatalysts because of this reason. Okay. So, but the problems with this semiconductors, nano semiconductors, okay, nanomaterials, semiconductors is that, see, whenever, so you can see this picture. You can see this black arrow, which is the light energy incident on the material. Light energy incident on the materials. It generates the electrons and holes. Okay, but the electrons and holes are separated. They move in the different directions. If at all, see at any place, if they recombine at the surface, it is called as surface recombination. If at any place inside the material, if it recombines, it is called as volume recombinations. Okay, and this recombination is not desirable. Recombination is not desirable because recombination always generates heat. Okay, it doesn't give you any useful output. It only whenever a light energy strikes the material, electrons and holes are created, and these electrons and holes are to be carried away to different locations. Okay, and the oxidation holes will cause the oxidation, and the electrons will cause reduction in different locations, thereby catalyzing the reactions. But on the other hand, if these holes and electrons combine together, what will happen? They will produce only heat. So we need to reduce this recombination. Okay, that is why the semiconductor alone it cannot be used as a photocatalyst. In a semiconductor, even though the band gap is sufficient to excite the electrons from the valence band to the conduction band, the recombination effect is more, which means whenever an energy H nu strikes the material, electrons holes generated are bound to recombine and produce heat effect rather than any catalyzing effect. Okay, so that is why there are many methodologies available to prevent this recombination. Okay. They are, first is doping. Okay, I'm not, see, there are different subdivisions in this modifications of semiconductor catalyst. There are different subdivisions in modifications. I'm not going to detail everything. I'm just going to mention about only very three basic strategies that are used to reduce this recombination effect and thereby improving the efficiency of nano-based photocatalyst. Okay, so first method is called as the doping. Doping with the metal and non-metal, everything is common. Okay, doping, what happens is that if you dope the material, Actually, see why, and moreover, majority of the processes use semiconductors. Okay, semiconductors such as TiO2 and zinc oxide as the materials for photocatalysis. Okay, for them, the dopant materials available are nitrogen. In the non-metal side, it is nitrogen, sulfur, carbon, phosphorus, etc. And the metal side, silver, magnesium, copper, niobium, cobalt, molybdenum, gold, platinum, etc. Everything is used. Okay, so we'll see how does it change. Okay, so this is called as doping. You can see the valence band. The electrons are transferred to the conduction band. They're leaving behind a hole here. Okay, so this is what is called as electron hole pair recombination. If you add a metal, what will happens? Okay, upon induction of light, the electrons are generated in the conduction band. Holes are generated in the valence band. They are called as excitons. Doping of metallic substance attracts the electrons from the conduction band. So as long as these electrons are formed in the conduction band upon excitation of energy, these electrons, when it is doped with a metal, can be transferred to this metal. Okay, so when the electrons are transferred to metal, then naturally it will suppress the electron hole pair recombination. When the electrons are available here, only a pair recombination happens. If you can transfer this metal electrons to this metals, then it can suppress the electron hole recombination. Okay, that is one method. It is called as metallic doping. Non-metals are also doped, but much of the works are done on metallic doping only. Next is called as the sensitization. Sensitization is again a dye molecule. Okay, so this is also sensitization of the light absorbing compounds with a because your dye compounds are basically narrow band gap compounds. Okay, narrow band gap compounds upon excitation of energy, because compared to this semiconductor material, the big molecule, the small molecule has a very small band gap. Okay, so when the incident energy is incident on this dye material, naturally the electrons are created here, and the electrons are transferred to the conduction band. Okay, so thereby activating the material. Typically, the light absorbing material can absorb the visible light, and photo generated electrons are excited from the conduction band to the valence band, and these electrons are transferred to the wide band gap semiconductors, thereby providing more electrons for the reaction. Okay, so here in this, the light energy is incident on the dye molecule than the semiconductors here. Okay, and the reaction electrons are being provided by the from the conduction band of the dye molecules to the conduction band of semiconductors. And the last category that I'm going to mention here is the plasmonic enhanced photocatalyst, which is picking up in research now. So here usually noble metals such as your gold and copper are used. Surface plasmon resonance. The process is called as surface plasmon resonance. Here basically what happens is the metal, noble metals such as gold and silver are being doped with a semiconductor material. Okay, when radiation of visible light, see this gold and gold and silver are highly effective for this surface plasmon resonance in the visible light region and the near infrared region than the UV light. Whereas your dye sensitization and your metallic doping are more pronounced for the UV light. Okay, plasmonic enhanced photocatalysis is basically for the near infrared region or the visible light region, basically part of your solar spectrum. Okay, when your incident energy from the solar spectrum is incident on this noble metals, what happens is they resonate on their surface. Okay, they resonate on their surface, and this resonated frequency, this resonated wavelength is transferred to your semiconductor materials. Okay, so in other words, when noble metals are irradiated with an electromagnetic wave, their conduction electrons will collectively oscillate. Okay, here in the noble metals, their conduction electrons will collectively oscillate and result in resonance scattering and absorption peak in the visible to the near infrared region. Okay, so that is how it will help in improving the SPR effect. This resonance is being transferred to the conduction band of your semiconductors. Okay, so moving on to the basic characteristics of your photocatalytic activity. So basically, we are again taking TiO2 here because TiO2 has been used as a basic semiconductor for all photocatalytic purposes, and it should start from usually titanium isopropoxide used. It is hydrolyzed to form the hydrated form of TiO2. It is then heated, calcined to give the anatase form, and again it is calcined or heated to form the rutile form. Okay. So this is a graph showing the relation between the crystallinity, surface area, and the crystal structure. Okay. When the calcination temperature is low, you get an amorphous form of TiO2. When the calcination temperature is high, you get a rutile form of TiO2, and in between is anatase phase. With the amorphous form of TiO2, you have low crystallinity and large surface area, whereas the rutile form has small surface area and high crystallinity. But trade-off between the two. Okay, usually the anatase phase is preferred for the photocatalytic processes because it has a well-defined or a average surface area as well as the average crystallinity. Okay, these are the various applications of nanomaterials, applications as photocatalysts. We can use in medicines, dyes, antibacterial activity, it has food safety, whatnot. See, nanomaterials has penetrated almost all applications of your day-to-day activities. Your drug delivery can be done with nanomaterials. Nano scaffolds have been preferred using this nanomaterials. And with respect to food safety, all your packaging materials are preferred with the nanomaterials. Okay, and your sensors that are used in food packaging applications also employ nanomaterials. In agriculture, also this nanomaterials had penetrated. Okay, nanoforms will be very useful in the initial growth of the plants. Okay, so nutrients in the nanoscale are being supplied in agriculture, etc. Okay, so whatnot, all applications, all your nanomaterial due to the small size and inherent applications has penetrated almost all fields of real life. Okay, so here I am going to give you only two case studies. One is the CO2 reduction. Okay, one is the CO2 reduction using the nanocomposite. Okay, nanocomposite that I am employing here is the your silver based nanocomposite. I'm just taking a break for 5 minutes. Just drink water and come back.
Hello.
Hello. I just will drink water and come back.
Yes, ma'am. Kindly hold on while the resource person is.
Okay, sir. Sure.
Definitely.
Okay, so let us move back to our presentation. So I told you with the large scope of nanomaterials as photocatalysts. Nanomaterials are widely employed in photocatalysts. Okay, because only these materials, the semiconductor materials that we have discussed, can, even though it can absorb the incident energy and transmit it for the photocatalytic purposes, when these photocatalysts are coupled with the nanomaterials, only their effectiveness increases or their recombination effect decreases. Okay, so that is why nano composites have been developed. Okay, nano composites are basically the incorporation of nanomaterials onto the basic catalyst to improve their performance. Okay, so in this, so we have done two different experimentations using this nano composites. One is for the reduction of carbon dioxide. Okay, because all of us know that carbon dioxide is a culprit for global warming, and somehow there were many studies related to the absorption of carbon dioxide, storage of carbon dioxide, and using carbon dioxide to grow algae and extract biodiesel from that. Okay, again, anyway, here this study is basically to use the photocatalysis process to capture carbon dioxide and to convert it to useful fuels, any hydrocarbon fuels, through the use of nanocomposite materials. Okay, so here we have used graphitic carbon nitride because it is a metal-free catalyst. Okay, the metal-free catalyst, and to this we have coupled silver bromide, silver chloride, and silver iodide for making use of as nanocomposites. Okay, so as you have seen, we have prepared this graphitic carbon nitride and doped with these nano forms of silver bromide, silver chloride, and silver iodide, and evaluated its efficiency in the conversion of carbon dioxide to useful fuels. Okay, so why we have selected graphitic carbon nitride? I told you it is a metal-free catalyst, and it can be easily synthesized, and the materials, the precursors are the initial starting materials for the synthesis are cheap and less costly. So that's why we've gone for graphitic carbon nitride. If you see the band gap diagram also, I told you we need to select material with a lesser band gap because only this lesser band gap materials can perform well with the light induced process. Okay, so in this we can see that among these materials, 2.7 is a better one in terms of this band gap as well as the material, because all these other things are, all the other combinations are have metals. Okay, so we wanted to select a non-metallic base catalyst. That's why we went for a graphitic carbon nitride. And graphitic carbon nitride, all these catalysts, whatever catalysts that I had mentioned here, zinc oxide, TiO2, strontium, okay, tantalum, etc. All these catalysts have been tried for CO2 reduction or CO2 conversion to useful fuels, and the various products are mentioned here. Okay, HCOH, HCHO, hydrogen, methyl alcohol, methane, etc. These are the various products obtained from the carbon dioxide reduction reaction. Okay. Okay, so the first nanomaterial that we have selected is the AGBR. Okay, so AGBR is basically used as a source material in photographic industry. Okay, it is also used extensively in the degradation of pollutants and destruction of bacteria. It has a band gap of around 2.6 electron volts. But again, the surface recombination is a major factor here. So we doped this. So this is how the preparation of graphitic carbon nitride and its doping with AGBR. So the precursors melamine is taken in an alumina crucible and it is kept in a muffle furnace at around 550 degrees for 3 hours. Then the resulting structure is called as the graphitic carbon nitride. And this graphitic carbon nitride is dispersed in a conical flask and is subjected to sonication, with which add a silver nitrate and KBr. Silver nitrate and Kb potassium bromide are being added to get a AGBR structure. So it is we got it in a sheet structure and it is powdered to form a nanocomposite of silver bromide with graphitic carbon nitride. Okay, and see, this is how it looks like, slightly yellowish in color. Since I made the slides based on the gray scale, the exact color is not visible here. Okay, so basically when you do the characterizations. When you do the characterization, you need to study the crystalline size. You need to find out the size to make sure that it is nano size, and how your AGBR and graphitic carbon nitride are being dispersed, how it is regularly, how it is decorated on the surface of graphitic carbon nitride, and how UV-DRS will tell you how enhance the visible light utilization. Okay, with the graphitic carbon nitride, how much is the visible light capture, as well as with AGBR, how much is the visible light capture, that also will give you. And the PL photoluminescence study and the photoelectrochemical study will tell you how much charge separation efficiency. Okay, charge separation efficiency must be, this is what I mentioned, right? When the charges are created, electrons and holes are created, it must be separated. Okay, if it is not separated, it will combine and form the heat. Okay, that is what is called as recombination. So that must be prevented. So that is why this study, photoluminescence study, will indicate about the charge separation efficiency with respect to graphitic carbon nitride, as well as the combination of AGBR and graphitic carbon nitride. And this is the experimental setup that we have used. The left one is the line diagram and the right one is the actual schematic setup. You can see this reactor here. A reactor has a gas sampling port, and in this we have used only the light source. Okay, UV light source we have used. Okay, you have a CO2 gas inlet also, and at bottom you have a liquid sampling. I think I will enlarge this picture so it is clear. Or if the background is colored one. Okay, so this is a magnetic stirrer on which this quartz reactor had been placed there. Okay, there's a liquid sampling port also. There's a gas sampling port. There's a port for introducing the light source, UV light source in this case, and there's a CO2 gas inlet here. So this is a CO2 cylinder. Okay, so what happens is. So CO2 gas is purged through this inlet and it is dispersed. So there are two mediums we have used. Basically, your CO2 has to be soluble in some medium. Okay, CO2 has to be soluble in some medium. So that then only it can be converted to the products. So here we have used two mediums, water as well as triethanolamine, TEA. Okay. So CO2 is dispersed in the medium here and the catalysts are embedded in the slurry itself. And there's a light source, UV light source, which is inserted into the mixture. Okay. And the reaction takes place. We take out the liquid sample also, for analysis of any gas product. We take out the gas sample also. And there are control experiments that have been done to ensure that it is actually a photocatalytic process. Okay, so for a photocatalytic process, what should be there? A source of light should be there, a catalyst should be there, and a reactant should be there, isn't it? So we tried various combinations of, first we tried control one, which is nothing but a reactant and a catalyst, but there was no light. Okay, so CO2 and catalyst without light, we couldn't get any product. Okay. And next we tried CO2 as well as light without a catalyst. Then also we couldn't get any product. Okay. And third, it's a light plus the catalyst without a reactant. Then also we couldn't get any product, useful product. Okay. So from that we concluded that a photocatalyst with the radiation of photon energy or light energy with a reactant only can give you the product. Okay, so this is the result of that. So this is first for the AGBR, silver bromide nanomaterial topped with a photocatalyst. You can see that loading, the left hand graph shows the AGBR loading, okay, or the silver bromide loading in the x-axis and the amount of CO2 converted in the y-axis. Okay, you can see that this speaks 1% AGBR is more, and then comes to 1.5. Okay, then it's around 0.5 AGBR, then graphatic alone and AGBR alone. Okay, so we could see that 1.5% loading of 1% loading of, even though 1.5 had a slightly lesser conversion efficiency. So we concluded that 1% AGBR is the optimum condition. AGBR with the doped with the graphitic carbon nitrate gave us the better result. So we could get methane, hydrogen, and acetone as the product. Okay, and as I told you, we have used two mediums to disperse carbon dioxide. One is water, and another is triethanol amine. Now, amine medium. Okay, amine medium has a better solubility for carbon dioxide than water. Carbon dioxide is better soluble in the amines than the water, so we could get a better product distribution with respect to amine. Okay, and reaction time is monitored. Okay, reaction time in hours, and the product formation. Okay, for various catalysts we have mentioned here, effect of catalyst dosage. Okay, and the selectivity. Okay, selectivity, as I told you, selectivity is basically the reactivity for a desired product. So we can tailor make this catalyst based on the selectivity. The same catalyst with the different sizes, and shapes can give you various different products. Okay, so that can be tailor made. When we started these experiments, we were bothered about the variety of the products that can obtain from the CO2 reduction. So we didn't bother much about the selectivity. However, from the results, we could find out that this AGBR based graphitic carbon nitride catalyst that we made had a better selectivity towards methane than the other products. Okay, so recycling stability. Recycling stability is basically see how many cycles you can use this catalyst. Okay, our catalyst. How do you do this experiment? See, after one set of batch experiments are completed, you remove the catalyst and then recycle the catalyst and then wash it and then use it for the next cycle of experiments. So till this, we conducted 4 cycles of experiments in the laboratory, and we didn't note any much change in the activity of the catalyst. And photo aging stability is the basically you subject the catalyst to photons. Photo aging means when you subject this catalyst to light source, how much aging or how much degradation it shows. That is called as photo aging stability. So we subjected, and particularly this is a silver based nanomaterial, isn't it? So silver based nanomaterials are prone to this light effect. Okay. So we subjected the catalyst material to light sources for 120 minutes, 240 minutes, and 360 minutes. We didn't observe much changes in the activity for the product yield. Again, storage in dark stability, fresh sample and aged sample. We stored the catalyst for around a few weeks and then determined how active it is how active it is in the formation of products. So there also we didn't observe much change in the aging effect. But again, we see why do we do all these studies? Is that in industries, in the laboratory scale, we generate only very few milligrams or grams of catalyst and employ them in the processes. But whereas in industries, the catalyst cannot be made in few grams and few milligrams and store it, and again you prepare it again fresh for the next batch. It has to be prepared in bulk and it is kept in storage. So when you keep the material under storage, how does it perform? That we need to find out. Okay, but in the laboratory scale, we kept it for very few weeks and then found out its activity. But you will have to perform for months together, at least for 3 months or 6 months, and then find out how active is your catalyst. Okay. So similarly, I'm just going to skip this. so similarly, we conducted the similar kind of experiments with the silver chloride also. Okay, so silver chloride is also prepared in the same way as that of silver bromide. Okay, silver bromide again is made a composite with the graphite carbon nitride, and characterizations are done. And here again, 1% silver chloride was found to be a better catalyst when compared with the other compositions of 1.5, 0.5, etc. And than graphite carbon nitride and ADCl alone. Again, in this medium-based study, we found out that triethanol amine TEA gave us the better results in terms of solubility of carbon dioxide. Once again, the stability test we have conducted, recycling, storage and ability, storage and dark stability, photoaging stability, selectivity. So here also this Ag silver chloride was also very highly selective for methane. Okay, methane produced was higher with respect to silver chloride catalyst. And we got formic acid also, even though in smaller quantity, we got acetic acid and formic acid also from the silver chloride based catalyst. And the last catalyst was silver iodide. Okay, silver iodide again has a problem of photo corrosion, so it cannot be used alone. So it has to be combined with a nano composite only. So, okay, so in this case also we found out that 1% silver iodide gave us the most promising results. But see here, luckily we have got hydrogen also, hydrogen and ethanol. Okay, hydrogen and ethanol was not found in the previous studies, but here the silver iodide gave rise to new research saying that if it can be tuned for ethanol selectivity, or if it can be tuned for hydrogen selectivity, it could be a breakthrough research. Okay, so the stability test also, photoaging stability also we conducted. Okay, and see, this was a liquid medium type of reactor using the nano composite, and we did this we used this nano composite in a gas phase reactor. Okay? So gas phase reactor, we just bubble through this carbon dioxide, and then this carbon dioxide is made to contact with the catalyst in the presence of light, and we monitored what is the process that is happening. It does your CO2 is not dissolved in any medium here. Okay, so this is a gas phase reactor that we have used. Okay, so we can see this is a gas reactor, doesn't have a medium to dissolve the carbon dioxide. Okay, just it is carbon dioxide is bubbled through water bubble to remove any other humidity that is present. Okay. So it is made to contact with the photocatalyst is coated on the bottom of the reactor. Quartz glass is available through which the light source penetrates. So this is the light source. You can see this is the UV light source that we have used. Okay, so various criteria that are tested here as the irradiation time, how much time material is being irradiated with the light source, and when you increase the distance between the light source and the reactor, what happens? Naturally, if you increase the distance between light, then there's going to be a lesser product. Power wattage of the light source also we have incorporated. Okay, so these are the results that are, I think I'll. Yes. So you see the last three rows pertains to the present study. Okay, where CO2 reduction is being carried out. You can see that silver bromide had given rise to methane and acetone.
Ma'am, your presentation is not visible, ma'am.
Not visible. One second. Says that sharing PowerPoint.
No clarity, ma'am.
No clarity.
Anyway, we will try to share the presentation with you after we get it from ma'am later.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Is it visible now? Is it visible now?
Not at ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know what is happening. One second. One second.
Still like that only, ma'am.
One second. One second. Sorry for that. 1 second. Now?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, so now I've selected the optimize for text and images. Maybe that's why. I don't know. Okay. Okay, so the last 3 rows of the table shows the present study of using the nanocomposites for photocatalysis applications. So you can see the variety of products that are obtained with the catalyst here: methane, acetone, acetic acid, formaldehyde is there. Okay, whereas and in the AGI, I told you when we were using the silver bromide, we could get ethanol also, even though in very small percentage, 1.92, but this should be explored further. Okay, using different sizes of catalysts or various combinations, etc. Okay. So that was the first case study. Second case study, I'll just go through in 18, 12, 13 now. I'll just go through the second case study. This second case study is again using the nano-based graphite carbonitrate catalyst in a continuous flow reactor for the degradation of phenolic effluent. Okay. So we performed okay, so this is a reactor setup. Basically, you can see it's a tray reactor. It's a tray kind of reactor in which the effluent is distributed from the top of the reactor through a pipe, and the catalyst is coated on the surface of these plates. You can see these plates; they are staggered here. The catalyst, the nanocomposite catalyst, is coated on the surface of the plates, and the effluent is allowed to pass through these plates, and we collected the effluent at different time intervals and found out the conversion of phenol to intermediate compounds. So here this is completely a solar light based setup, because the previous one we used a UV lamp because the catalyst we employed there was highly active in the UV region. But whereas here we have selected catalyst in such a way that it is able to perform in the solar light also. Solar light is basically your infrared and your visible light spectrum. Okay, so these are the operational parameters that we have: effect of irradiation time, effect of pH of the mixture, effect of pH of the effluent, chemical oxidant, flow rate, etc. And these are the types of catalysts we have employed. We have employed a bare graphite carbonitrate. We have coupled the graphite carbonitrate with the PiO2. Then we went on for sodium doped graphite carbonitrate, potassium doped carbonitrate, and layered double hydroxide zinc and aluminum. Double layer. Okay, double layer means it has 2 layers of nanocatalyst. So zinc and aluminum layered double hydroxide. And we went for a non-metal based boron doped graphite carbonitrate also. So these are the performance studies. Phenol, basically it is a tannery effluent, and it is collected from a treatment section where chromium was removed. So we went on for analyzing the how much phenol is being degraded, because phenol is in an effluent is again toxic when it is discharged into the atmosphere, to the environment. So we went to check for the phenol degradation here. So you can see the various catalysts performing. In the literature, you can see that there are many nanocatalysts which can perform around 90%, 95%, etc. But those are all for synthetic effluent. But what we have taken a real effluent here. Okay, real effluent means a real effluent that is obtained from the industry and used our catalyst to perform this studies. Okay, stability studies. As such, the catalyst, the catalyst that we have developed was not highly stable because you can see from the experimental setup itself. See, it's an open reactor setup. It's not a closed one. It's an open reactor setup. Okay, and the catalyst is coated on the plates over here. So naturally, there was leaching of the catalyst. Okay, so there was too much of leaching of the catalyst from the surface of the plates to the effluent out to the output there. So we couldn't control that. Probably a better method of coating of the catalyst or a better catalyst formulation binding material would have avoided this leaching, but we didn't try that after that. So there was much leaching of the catalyst. So you can see that after 10 cycles of run itself, the stability got reduced from around. See, in the last catalyst, you can see it was earlier around 75, 76%. It got reduced to 60% within 10 cycles runs itself. So that's actually a greater disadvantage because the industries will never accept such kind of catalyst which remains inactive after only this 10 cycles of runs. Okay, so that was the environmental part of using this catalyst. Basically, our sodium and potassium salts combined with the graphitic graphitic nanosheets gave us the better results. Okay. So just going to conclude this talk. So far we have discussed why a nanocatalyst and why a nanomaterial is picking up so fast and how it can be used for photocatalysis. Let me tell you about the challenges of this photocatalysis also, because till now, no such material is developed which can give you a higher percentage of quantum efficiency when compared to the commercial methods already available. Okay, so there are so many challenges that a photocatalyst is being faced. Okay, so now we need to find out materials with focus on high efficiency coupled with the comprehensive material characterization, standardization at the experimental conditions and test reactors. Actually, there are a number of nanocatalysts available. Number of nanomaterials are available as photocatalysis, but each experiment or each nanomaterial is done with a different site configurations, different type of reactions, different type of effluents, and it is very difficult to consolidate based on a single material or based on a single reaction. I think you get my point, because if I take pollutant degradation, or if I take the water treatment itself, okay, for water treatment, there are n number of catalysts available with the different reactor configurations, with the different nature of effluent itself. So it is very difficult to consolidate or to come to a conclusion how it can be consolidated to tell that yes, this particular catalyst is highly active for this particular effluent. It's very difficult. And again, the efficiencies have to be reported on apparent quantum efficiency, quantum yield, based on the number of products released per photon of energy observed. Okay, that should be reported rather than the efficiency. Okay, and again, the energy efficiency has to be considered in detail, because when you take it to the industry scale, naturally, when you involve lots of quantum of catalyst, there must be some recovery system for this catalyst to further recycle this catalyst. So recovery system again implies too much of energy. Okay, for pumping and catalyst recovery, too much of energy is involved. So energy efficiency also has to be taken care. And future of catalyst lies basically in the composites. They gone are the days when with which you use single material as the catalyst. Now, composite of nanomaterials, different combinations of polymers are being tried out. Biological systems are being tried out. There are composites of catalysts available that needs to be explored. And again, specific properties of the nanocomposites have to be screened. What is the optical property? What is the quantum property? How is the magnetic property of the composites for a particular application that needs to be turned on? Okay, biomimicking. Biomimicking is basically, see now this is the trend. Okay, if you can mimic the nature, okay, if you can mimic the nature, then naturally the efficiency improvement is better. So photocatalyst employing the mimicking of nature, or if you can duplicate the nature, you can duplicate the nature in a photocatalyst, then naturally higher efficiency can be achieved. Okay, and when we say that doping, sensitization, and plasmonic effect and all, when you attach the materials with another metal or non-metal, etc., naturally, even though the recombination effect reduces, but the electronic structure of the metal again is going to be different. So that is going to alter the reaction again. Okay, and there are thermodynamic limitations also. We have to find out new formulations. Okay, well, the possibility of this nano-based photocatalyst, you can try out small-scale systems. As such, the photocatalyst that have been developed, it's not tried out on a large commercial scale applications, but for small-scale systems that are viable. Small-scale systems where you do not bother much about the do not have to spend much on the catalyst side. You can try this photocatalyst, as well as you can try optimum reactor designs using UV LED. Wherever required, you can have small scale UV LED systems. Small scale UV LED systems are cost effective, as well as it can go for a number of cycles. So any catalyst that can work in UV LED will be a good. Okay, so such kind of systems you can try in small scale. Also, this nanotechnology is basically a it's a like how you say it's a nano composite. The working of nano composite is also does require the knowledge of physicist, chemist, material scientist, and engineers, because only physicist and chemist will know the background of your nanomaterial, its structure, and how does it perform. Material scientists will know what kind of materials to be incorporated, and engineers only know how to take it to the application side. So all this input is being needed to address the challenges regarding the scaling up, and industry input is also needed. As such, the industry is not, even though they are interested in this nano concept, they are much reluctant to take this nano concept to the industry, because naturally the cost economics are not worked out. It is, as such, it is not very cost effective at this moment. So all this input from all the branches of study are required to address these challenges and take the industry input to reduce the gap between the academic industry and practical applications. Then only this nano composite will really take it to the market. Okay, so with this, stop my presentation.
Participants, in case if you would like to ask any questions, you can use the chat window, please, to type your questions.
So these should